Some people might think that there's not much happening after Pluto. We flew by, we got all the data down, but we are in the midst of planning. We're planning for our next encounter.
New Horizons is flying on past Pluto another 1 billion miles to make a flyby on January 1st, 2019 of a small Kuiper Belt object.
MU69 is going to be a really interesting object because it is representative of the building blocks from which planets were formed.
2014 MU69 is by far the most primitive and pristine object that we've ever had the opportunity to fly by. By virtue of its small size and its isolation, we believe that it is probably the closest we've ever been to something like a primordial building block of the planets.
So we've got the arrested development of the solar system waiting there for us to explore.
One of the most challenging aspects of the MU69 flyby is simply targeting the flyby. Never before has a spacecraft launched to a target that's not even discovered at the time of launch, much less tried to home in on something where we'll only have known about it for a small number of years and only tracked it through about 1% of its orbit around the sun. And yet we have to intercept it potentially even closer than we did with Pluto.
We are planning the sequences, what science we're going to do. We're even planning ground-based observations to figure out where the target is.
We have a chance for a sneak preview of MU69 this summer from watching it pass in front of 3 different stars, actually. If we're lucky, we might get all 3 of them.
The shadow from that star will be projected onto Earth, and we're going to be on Earth looking at the starlight dimming due to MU69 going in front, and that's going to tell us precisely where MU69 is.
We have an expedition that's going to go attempt to make this observation because it's only visible from a very small part of the Earth, and we have to predict that very precisely.
You have MU69, you have a star, MU69 passes in front of the star and blocks the light.
If I'm the star, and this is MU69 moving in past you, and you're the Earth, and observers are on the Earth, as MU69 is moving in front of me, the star, it's blocking the starlight. And so if you were looking at the star, you would see it dim out over time and then come back up as MU69 passes in front. You are effectively in the shadow of the starlight.
The 3 events are June 3rd, July 10, and July 17. Of these, the first and last are our best candidates, and that's where we're putting most of our efforts into. And what this means is that we're putting out a large mobile network of telescopes.
This MU69 occultation campaign is the biggest one I've ever been involved in. We are trying to get to the shadow path where it's only probably about 30 kilometers across. And there's great uncertainty on where that shadow is going to fall on the Earth.
The position of the star and the orbit of MU69 dictates a place on Earth that you have to be in order to see this phenomenon. For the June 3rd event, that means that we need to be in north-central Argentina and right in the middle of South Africa.
The reason we're doing this is so that we can maximize our chances of having good weather, because we wouldn't want a huge storm system to come through and cloud us out.
When we're planning this, we have to sort of guess the size of the object. We take that guess and we can superimpose a track on the surface of the Earth that says if the prediction is perfect, we know exactly where the shadow's going to fall. Unfortunately, we don't know perfectly where it's going to be. There's some measurement errors. And that dictates the area that we need to cover on the Earth in order to see that shadow. We call it a picket fence. So we set up a regular grid of telescopes along typically a north-south line with the goal of having a 98% chance of success. For the June 3rd event, we have to cover 400 kilometers on the surface of the Earth. And for the July 17 event, we have to cover 200 kilometers.
We're going to send out 22 portable telescopes, plus others that will be supplied by the University of Virginia, and fixed telescopes, all so that we can maximize our chance of being in that shadow path.
What a ground-based occultation campaign gives us is a wide net. We can't put our big assets everywhere that we'd like them, so instead we put many small assets spread out over a large area so that we're guaranteed that a few of them will detect the event.
You can use these occultations to look for rings or satellites or, debris disks. And so that's of critical importance to the mission to know what's in the vicinity of this object, because it could be a hazard for the spacecraft.
We didn't think that small objects like this could have rings until a couple of years ago, and then we actually discovered that Shrinklo, it has 2 rings.
Tricks up their sleeves that we don't even understand yet.
We just never have done an occultation of an object this small in the Kuiper Belt before, so we don't know.
The occultation signature for MU69 by itself would look, the starlight would be bright, and then it would drop down to a low level, and it would come back up. But if there was debris in the area, you would have short, small dropouts, and then the occultation by MU69, and then maybe short dropouts again if you had, say, a ring of material or debris encircling MU69. So that's how we're going to learn this.
The way this works is you've got an object, say it's a circle, and you need to get 2 cuts across that circle in order to uniquely determine the size of it. So if it's a 40-kilometer circle, that means that you need to have 2 stations separated by no more than 20 kilometers to ensure that you get 2 cuts across it.
These occultation observations are so powerful, but they only take a short duration.
The signal that we are putting all this effort into is for that star to disappear for 2 seconds.
So we are spending months preparing and deploying teams to go into the field to observe something that's less than 3 seconds long. But it's the only way we can get this information. It's unique information. And so it's not about how long it takes to get the data. It's about what we're going to learn by doing this.
All 54 people ready to go is an essential part of our success.
When you're talking about occultation stuff, you got to get down and dirty. It's about building equipment, finding parts, figuring out how to pack it up, how to make it so it's going to survive transit to a foreign country where you get there and have to deal with all the local logistics there. You got to worry about, can I pick this up? Can I unload a truck on the other end, or do I need a forklift? Can I find a forklift?
We've made sure that we haven't matched 2 people who might not be good at heavy lifting together. I know that the largest crate does in fact weigh more than I do, but with the assistance of someone else, I can hold up my half, even the heavy side.
The first thing that is done is Mark actually builds the telescopes.
I still love getting out into the lab and getting out to working with physical hardware. Maybe it's a little mindless and repetitive, but it's surprisingly difficult to make sure that you are 100% accurate in putting together these telescopes. It's the worst thing in the world is to send one of these things halfway around the world and they're missing a bolt because you didn't count the bolts to make sure you had 12 instead of 11. Work on it to get a little bit better each time and shave all these extra motions down and see how fast I can get them out, but still 100% accurate. So I can tell you now, I can build one of those telescopes in 30 minutes. As long as there's nobody talking to me, that slows me down.
For each telescope setup, we've got 4 different cases. There's 2 for the base, 1 for the actual optical tube of the telescope, and then 1 for all the other equipment, including the camera and the laptop and that. And we actually assemble it for the very first time. And then the next step is to make sure that the mirror is collimated. So that just means that the mirror is set up so that when you look down the eyepiece of the telescope, you're actually looking at the center of the mirror.
This is a huge project. It requires a huge team to pull it off, not just for the observers. So we've got more than 50 people flying out in the field together. But I've got some great help and assistance here in the office in Boulder. Amanda Zangari's been helping a lot with corralling all of the observers, keeping track of them.
So mostly I've been herding cats. 54 people that were flying down to the southern hemisphere, setting up equipment to make sure that all the pieces are there, and so somebody doesn't open their box up in the middle of nowhere in South Africa and say, I'm missing a finder scope.
So we just made sure that all that electronics and everything worked, and the battery pack worked and everything. So that's as much as we can do inside without actually putting the telescope on the sky. And then we packed up the telescopes, labeled them, and then got them ready to do the on-sky checkout, which is we're going to start tonight.
Tonight we're doing boot camp. We've got a bunch of people that have never seen these telescopes before, never used them end to end with all the parts and pieces and setting up on the stars and running the camera. And so we're doing two things, testing the equipment as well as training everybody how to use it. And right now, I'd say we've got about 10 mistakes for every successful thing. And we're hoping to improve that ratio before the end of the night.
So the volunteer observers are sort of a mixture. Some of them are professional astronomers, not all of which have used portable telescopes before.
My favorite parts about astronomy is the diversity of the tools of the trade. You go from one end, $1 billion spacecraft that flies across the solar system to take a picture of new horizons. And then you go all the way down to things like our 16-inch telescope, but they each have a role. It's an amazing experience to go through and do these, to predict and be in the right place, and then that on the magic time and magic night, that star winks out. I guarantee you, if you ever see this for the first time, you'll be hooked for life. We have a total of 12 telescopes that we have to process and put to bed tonight to get ready for shipping, to clear the decks so that tomorrow night we can do the other 10. These are really typically high-risk, high-reward observations. And you never know when we're going out, are we going to succeed on this one? And it's not for the lack of trying, because weather is the thing that rears its ugly head. If you've done everything perfect and it's cloudy that night, it's all for naught.
Going on an occultation campaign is like being an adventuresome traveler. You're going off somewhere, you don't know exactly where you're going to be. You need to be placed so that you can make the observations you need. You need to be able to be someplace where it's expected to be clear, so you might have to move 100 kilometers in one direction or another to get to clear weather and still be in the shadow path. So I love that. I love the adventure of it.
Our measurements depend entirely on the weather. That's one of the reasons why we're going to both South America and South Africa, because we can have redundancy.
You have to be in the right place at the right time in order to be successful with an occultation. And so if you have to be ready when the event is occurring, because the solar system is not going to stop for us.